Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty podcast. We are on week 3 of Major 2 here. We're very close to the Major itself. Major itself will be next weekend, but we're now going to preview the last 3 games, last 10 games of week 3 here. I am joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics. How are you doing today on this Wednesday night?
I'm doing well. Just got done with a little pre-recording NFL talk as we get closer to conference championship weekend. But yeah, obviously still some COD to be played this weekend in the lead up to the major. Yeah, it's weird that we're already at almost the second major of the year, and January's not even over yet. But yeah,
Yeah.
it just goes to show that an early start to the season is very nice. But yeah, as we go into this next week, right, a lot will shake out. We have 10 of the 12 teams having at least one win and one loss going into this final week. We have one undefeated team, we have one winless team. We'll get to them later, but just a huge cluster of teams in the middle, a lot of movement to be had in the seeding. We'll see how lower bracket shakes out and all that other good stuff. But yeah, 10 more matches this weekend, and I'm pumped as always.
Yeah, it's crazy that the last couple of weeks we've been watching. I've been able to put on uh, the football. We've been able to put on NFL football playoffs and have caught on at the same time on Saturdays
It's
and Sundays.
wonderful.
It's great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's been great having that. Again, we had it a little last year. The kickoff thing was the same weekend as I think it was the divisional round. The kickoff thing was that weekend, and then I think this started. Then I think the second week of the CDL season was the weekend of the Super Bowl. So we had a little bit of overlap last year, but again, now we're getting much deeper overlap into the season. And again, I do not think it's coincidence that the major will occur on the break between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl, and then basically be happening the same weekend as Super Bowl. I do not think that's a coincidence. But yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a conspiracy theory, yes, but you know what? That's fine, totally fine. It's good marketing. That's a good idea. That this is a positive change. But yeah, it is crazy that we're already basically going to be 2/5 of the way through. I guess what you would refer to as the regular season. Like this, it's crazy that this entire year is going to end in March, at the end of May, right? At the end of May, the regular season's over, and then we have no idea when champs will be. But like that's going to be the earliest end of the year ever, basically. And champs maybe will be in June, but usually we get champs sometime in August. So going to be a huge off season, and we have no idea what that'll look like next year. There's going to be some sort of, I guess, DLC for the game. It's going to have a bunch of old classic maps, probably have an expanded campaign, probably some more features or whatever. We have no idea on that yet, and we'll probably won't find out about that soon. But yeah, for now, this year is great. One quick note on what you said there at the top. It is fascinating that, yeah, 10 teams have at least one win in this major qualifier so far. And you could definitely actually see that effect in the odds, right? I think I'm looking just quickly here on the odds. The biggest favorites I have are minus 450. That's actually the second game we'll talk about. That's the subliners in the second game. We'll talk about them soon. But that's the biggest favorites we have. Like overall, this year is way more balanced. I mean, at this point in time last year, we were seeing like, and it was Paris. We could say Paris. It was Paris at the time. It
Yes.
was it was Paris. Paris was like we saw like minus 1,200 odds against Paris at that point, right? And to be fair, hilariously, coincidentally, the minus 450 is also against the Legion. So it's similar, but I mean to be fair, that is against one of the best teams in the league. But like no, like last year, like we saw a lot more disparity, and this year it's a lot more equal. And there's lots of different questions about why that is. Is it the fact that this game is seemingly a bit more random? Teams can go on kind of hot and cold streaks. Or maybe it's the fact that there is some more parity in this league. Teams are starting to get really good at this roster construction thing. Some are, at least. Florida is doing Florida things. They've subbed out Brack for Dave Patty. No idea why that happened. Just no idea. I mean, Dave Patty,
Yeah.
sure. Brack is. Well, actually, let's talk about that in the context of our first game. So, our first game up, we got Florida versus London. Florida is. Florida. Well, that's weird. So, Florida is the underdog, but yet their spread is minus 1.5. Their spread of minus 1.5 is plus 275. London Royal Ravens spread of plus 1.5 is minus 400. That's that's weird. Usually doesn't do that. But anyway, even on the money line for Florida are plus 100, Ravens minus 130, over 4.5 plus 165. So yeah, why does this team move make sense for you for a Florida standpoint or not? I have lots of concerns about it. What do you think?
Yeah, it was a bit of a head scratcher when I first saw it. Brack, I'd say, has been one of their bright spots this year on this Mutineers roster. That isn't that bad. Like you look at the results, and they've been okay. A lot better than some people have thought they would be. But yeah, last week was a little troublesome for them, so I understand why they would make a roster move. But yeah, subbing out Dave in for Brack, we'll see if it works. Dave Patty obviously made some plays last year during Vanguard. Um, and it was also weird with Florida, right? Because going into the offseason, Florida mentioned that Dave Patty would be their one carryover player from Vanguard to MW2, and yet he didn't make the starting roster. So that felt odd to begin with because you're like, okay, you're keeping him, but you found four other players to start in front of him. So it felt like at some point in time he'd come back onto the roster, just maybe not in place of Brack, who's been performing well overall this year. So yeah, a bit of a head scratcher, but London, their opponent, have made a head scratching move. Going into last week, they put Paul X back in place of Zero. Mixed results with that. I don't know. Is it for the better? Is it for the worse? We'll continue to find out as we watch them play more maps. But yeah, overall with those numbers, I do lean Florida slightly, even with that roster change. I don't think Dave Patty will be disastrous. Like I don't think the fall off is, if there is a fall off, will be that drastic. But I also don't think Dave Patty's going to come in and this Florida team's going to rise up in the power rankings and we're like, oh my goodness, they've needed Dave Patty all this time. That's their secret weapon. I think this team is more or less the same. And I do think they're still better than London. London is a head scratcher team too. Um, and yeah, this essentially is a game where I am more inclined to take an underdog, but especially with a Florida team that's just proven to me, that they can get some good results this year, especially in Search and Destroy. Um, but yeah, granted, Search and Destroy, will that maybe have a little bit of a downtick with a new teammate? We'll see, but London, that's not a great mode for them anyway. So I lean Florida. I don't love it either way, but honestly, this game could mean a lot for a loser's bracket start.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually do have Florida as the favorites here. Actually, semi sizable favorites. I got them 64.765% favorites. So it's actually pretty substantial. I actually do have this game going to going over 4.5, 43% of the time. So the over 4.5 definitely in consideration there. But definitely, like, I don't think either of these teams can actually win in 5 games. I think
Yeah, yeah,
like yeah, these teams are not like this London team is so iffy. Like just straight up, it's just like, what are you do? Like this team has struggled. They've lost so many winnable games that
yeah.
it's like, what are you like? They've lost so many winnable games, and then Scraps just went off against Minnesota. I'm probably going to rewatch that game and figure out what happened in that. There's a couple games I still haven't had a chance to rewatch yet, and I plan on doing that. That Minnesota London game is one of them where it's like, what happened in this game? There's a couple others we'll talk about later, but like I don't know what it is. This London team is just not good. I don't know what they're doing. Like they are doing the weirdest like they should be stronger, and my metrics like them a lot more than they actually are. Like my metrics think like no, not my metrics, sorry, my numbers. Metrics same thing, but my numbers usually have them being like somewhat okay, and they just keep disappointing to the downside. And I don't know what the problem on this team is. I think it's gotten a little better with scraps in for Zero, but it's such a weird team that just is underperforming expectations. And I don't know how they fix that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this roster just has to play it out a little longer, right? I mean, we did see one win last week versus Vegas Legion, a 3-1 victory. So, that's a result you'd like to see. But yeah, I mean, ASIM's been good. Scraps, right? Yeah, he absolutely did pop off. So it's like, okay, if he can find his footing, continue that, just be consistent, we maybe can see results. But yeah, I mean, their search and destroy has been putrid. They're 5-10 on the year. That includes Scraps and Paul X on the team, um, and the zero roster as well. So yeah, Surge has got to get fixed. And Control is pretty bad too. Their only wins on Control are on Hotel, which thankfully is the most played Control map by far. But, you know, if they roll into a series and that other team decides to veto it, all right, you're playing on a Control map you have not won yet. Hardpoint has been okay. Um, and I think just looking at the roster, that makes some sense. But yeah, their search, their control is not up to snuff. And I think that's kind of where Florida can expose this London team. I expect Florida to win the series. I expect it to go to a map 5. Um, so yeah, maybe if you want to play the over 4.5 maps, that's one way to go about it. Because Florida, right, very very bad at hardpoint. That could be where London come in. We could kind of see what London did last weekend with Vegas, like a 3-1 victory where you take both those hard points. That seems like the path, and you're going to need a control in there somewhere, or turn around your search. But against this Mutineers team that's actually pretty good at search, I just don't see it happening. So overall, I think when this match is over, yeah, it's a Florida 3-2. It's an ugly win, right? It's a series we watch and we go, man, yeah, these teams are not contenders. But we'll see. Maybe one of them surprises us. Maybe Dave Patty comes in and puts up some results. But yeah, this one I lean Florida. I think I like it enough to take the even money, but I'm okay if you just want to stay away because this match is not the most exciting.
Yeah, this one seems to me like this screams to me as like a no one is gonna take Florida in this game, so that's why the books are saying like, oh, take Florida, right? So, oh no, okay. So one of the things I've actually found very useful is online on the Call of Duty League Pick'ems thing, where you get to make your picks for who you think is going to win each match and by what.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they actually have added a new option where you can it's the little chart at the top right hand side, and basically it shows you what percentage of the public is picking each side. And that's
Mm-hmm.
extreme, and as betters, that is extremely useful to me because if I know, like, if I look at this and I say that is way too much money on one side, then I'm like, okay, I'm 100% taking the other side, right? And like this thing. So this one actually, the public is on Florida about 57% of the time. So there are some people on Florida in this match. So that's maybe a little concerning there, but um, yeah, we'll have to see. But I'm still on Florida. We're getting plus money from the books. I'll take Florida in this one. I think Florida is the right play here. Next matchup, Las Vegas Legion versus New York Subliners. Vegas plus 1.5 minus plus 180. Subliners minus 1.5 minus 240. Very steep price for a 3-1 or a 3-0 there. Vegas Legion plus 290 to win. Subliners minus 450. Over 3.5 minus 240. Not even getting 4.5 there. So for some reason you can't bet the spreads online, but it shows what the spread are. So subliners on the hard point are minus 46.5, which is relevant because remember what we said early on in the season about that relevance of that 50 number, right? I mean, we have key numbers in football, right? You got like your threes, your sevens, your fours, right? Your key numbers. We said maybe a key number for this Call of Duty might be that 50 number. We're hitting that now. We're starting to get to where like when you have like the best team of something playing one of the worst teams of something else, you're starting to hit that 50 number. That's kind of starting to become a key number there. So that's something to look at as well. But I don't know. I've got New York is about an 81% favorite in this game. I've got a 3-1 here, but it's just that it's a very very steep price to pay for a minus 1.5. You can't lay that straight. Maybe you could throw it in a parlay somewhere. You could maybe bet a couple of games. Like for example, you could probably bet depending on what you have for control. Maybe you could bet subliners minus 1.5 control. I'm seeing that minus 145. That's not fun, but it's not bad. You could potentially pick up like Legion -1.5 in the search. They're very, very good at search. Um, but it's just you can't, like, the price is steep, and it's just not worth it to bet that on this. At least that I feel it's not worth it to bet this on this Vegas team right now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, this one is pretty clear cut, right? New York are a phenomenal team. I have them power ranked as the best team in the league. Vegas are okay, just kind of middle of the pack, maybe mediocre at best. But yeah, Search and Destroy Vegas Legion I have as the number one team in the league. Hardpoint and Control are horrible. So right, you're looking at a very narrow path to victory for Vegas, but um, yeah, if Vegas get that map two pick, very likely they could win the Search and Destroy in 10 rounds or less. So that -1.5 could make some sense. Um, but yeah, I don't know. This one's priced about right. My numbers are similar to yours. I have New York as an 82% favorite to win. Might be a little on the steep side, but overall, that means there's just not a ton of value in this game. Um, and yeah, Vegas Legion, a bad weekend last week, right? Losing to London, which we already talked about. That doesn't look good. They really, really had a nice shot to like get at least one win last week and just make their winners bracket losers bracket situation a lot more comfortable, but now they're sitting at 1-2. Obviously could get winners bracket, but they have a tough road going into this week. So yeah, this one more of a stay away for me. I expect probably a New York 3-1 victory, with Vegas taking that Search and Destroy, but crazier things have happened. New York is clearly one of the best teams in the league. Vegas might be reeling a little bit. If they can fix their hard point and control, they're obviously a much different team, but I just don't expect that to happen in 1 week playing one of the best hard point and control teams in the game. So stay away from me, but I lean New York, maybe, yeah, to cover a hard point spread or a control spread even. They're that good in that mode. Um, so yeah, that's where I lean for this match.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, it's such a hard call. Like, I think that might be one I kind of want to stay away from. Don't really want to get too involved in that match. I don't think. Next up, FaZe versus LAG. FaZe -1.5 even or +100. LAG +1.5 -130. FaZe -240. LAG +175. Over 4.5 +165. So this match is actually fascinating because this match functionally happened during the last major, when the LAG Academy, it's basically the same team. They played FaZe, and they actually, I think they beat FaZe, right? Yeah, they beat FaZe in 5 games, right? I
No,
think
not quite. They
they.
got close, but FaZe still did win.
Oh, it was the 6-5. Yeah, 6-5 in round 11, game 5, round 11, right? Yeah. So my model does have FaZe as slight favorites here, about 61% favorites, 60-40. But I actually do have the +1.5 for LAG. It's about a 54% chance as a favorite. So you got some slight value there, even at paying the 130. You still got some slight value there. So I don't hate that. Um, Again, you also have to remember that this is an RCD's revenge game, right? This is the team that got rid of him. So there is that angle to it, RCD's revenge game. Also, FaZe, what the heck happened with that's another match I need to watch. FaZe versus Minnesota. What happened there? I have no idea what happened.
I I would not worry about that, Robert. As we saw, right, Minnesota then lost to LAG a day later.
So by second order
Yeah,
dominance, then LAG is better than FaZe.
right, right. But no, if you look at that Atlanta Minnesota score line and you go, okay, Rocker 3-0 FaZe, like I said, weird stuff with Rocker can happen like that. And that's exactly what happened. Like I don't want to say it was just kind of chance that they got that 3-0 victory, but it kind of was, right? Like they win that hard point, I want to say by like 8 points. Let's see here. Minnesota by 4 points, excuse me. So Minnesota get a 4-point hard point victory. Then they come out, they beat them in search. That was impressive. I'll give Minnesota that 6-3 on hotel, and then Minnesota win a weird control 3-2, where Minnesota essentially just didn't move in round 4 because they knew they had the kill advantage to get defense for round 5. That's exactly how it played out. Just that was a weird series, right? Atlanta got swept. That never happens. I think the last time it happened was Rocker last year, like early last year. So yeah, Fays are fine, right? They come out, they beat New York in the last match of the weekend, a match that had some delays in it. It obviously wasn't ideal, but yeah, Atlanta are beatable. Like, there's a lot of teams in this league that are on their level, if not better than Faze. LAG, maybe, right? You did mention that LAG Academy game that went down to the wire. Hardpoint was shaky. Um, yeah, my numbers say Faze are favored by 84%. That's a little too high when you just consider that this LAG team has looked so good if you just take into account that Academy roster plus our cities. And I know you said it's an our cities revenge game. It's also a slasher revenge game. Let's not forget about that. But
How that's a oh well yeah that's true, yeah, it is a slasher revenge game, yeah, but was
yeah,
it,
double revenge game.
did they bench
But
him and then they got like they're like, oh, you're gone, is that how did that, or did he just was like, I'm gone? I can't remember how that worked.
well, he played with LAG all last year. I don't know if he played. I'm trying to think. Cold War, he was a LA Thief, I want to say, right? But yeah,
Yes, and then
Slasher
he
was
got
on the
benched.
LAG roster all last year. Um, Arcides was on the Phase roster all last year, all the year before. So yeah, it was a huge AR swap. That was a big talking point in the offseason. We kind of liked the move for both teams. And, after a month or so, maybe it was worse for both teams. But now that LAG's got that revamped young roster, they're an exciting team. And, I don't know if they're on that contenders level with New York and with Toronto, but they're not in the basement anymore. Like they're not the worst team in the game. And yeah, they definitely could take Phase to another game 5. They could win it outright. A match I'm super excited to watch, and by far my most interested match for Friday is this one. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, my numbers, I kind of got to throw them out for this game. I have Phase as a huge favorite, but obviously with how these teams are trending, like I got to make it more of a, I don't know, maybe a 70-30 in favor of Phase, but maybe that's even too high.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? It's hard to say exactly because when you're dealing with this, it's like you have to like it's weird, right? Like how much do you value like revenge game and all that stuff? I like the LAG plus 1.5. I think they can win. Maybe sprinkle a little on the plus 175, but I don't think Phase finishes them off in 4. I don't think so. I kind of like the plus 1.5. This Phase team is nowhere near as dominant as we've seen them in the past. Still good, but they're nowhere near as dominant, right? And the fact that Minnesota took them to the wire means that they still got a long way to go, right? And I I don't know. I just don't think Phase are the best. Now Phase did beat Subliners. They took them to 5. They got crushed both times in hardpoint, and I think that's reflected in some of the lines we're going to see that the hardpoint spreads, and why Subliners are such a big favorite against. That's why they're such a big favorite against Vegas. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'd say like this is a matchup I'm really excited for, and it's gonna show us if this LEG team basically by finally dumping their entire roster and going for academy players, are they actually on the right path this time? I think yes, but we're not going to know for at least a little bit now. And actually, speaking of LAG, they're also playing in the next game too, because the next game they're playing against the next basically probably I guess you could say the second best team in the game. Phase is third best in the game. I think you'd say Toronto was the second best team in the game. They're playing the Toronto Ultra. Uh, LAG plus 1.5 minus 150 again, favored to take it to game 5 functionally. Ultra minus 1.5 plus 115. LH on the money line plus 150. Ultra on the money line minus 200 over 4.5 plus 165. So Semi-similar line actually. They actually have better odds against Toronto than they do against FaZe. So basically, the market is saying that FaZe is still the better team, which I don't necessarily believe.
I don't
Um,
at all. No,
no, but my model is weirdly enough saying that my model does like LAG over Toronto, which is really weird because I don't think it should be that at all. But again, my Toronto really struggled with hardpoint, and I think Toronto losing to Optic at hardpoint really hurt them. I think is the problem. So the problem is it's hard to win series when you're losing hardpoints by the margin that the model is saying Toronto will lose the hardpoints by, and that's the problem. And they've also struggled with some SDs. They're good at control, but again, if you can't win hardpoints, then you're not going to win series, right? So I do like Toronto here, and again, it is not lost on me that I need this Toronto win to cover. I'm probably not going to bet on the money line in this game because I need Toronto money line to cash the over 4.5. So if I'm betting anything in this game, it's probably going to be LAG money line just to cover the futures bet. But I mean, I think this Toronto team is still really good. Another match I need to see is Toronto versus Optic to see what the heck happened in that match as well. Those are the three matches that I'm like, what happened in these games? Because that Toronto Optic match is like, what happened? Because I mean, the thing is, we came into this major with the thesis that Toronto and Subliners were the two best teams in the game. And I think that's mostly been proven true, except that now suddenly there's this Optic team that's just come out of nowhere. And again, so it was there, and then they took, I think week one they took Seattle to 5, Boston to 5, I can't remember. They took someone to 5, beat them in 5, and then Scump retired, and we're like, all right, well they're going to take a bit of a step back because Scump was at that point one of the best players in the game at that point. But we're like, okay, they'll take a step back, but you know what? They're still a really good team. Let's see where they go from here. Well, now they've apparently turned into another even higher gear. Oh no, so they played Seattle week one, then Boston last week, took Boston to 5, and then they played Toronto, and they lost to Boston. They lost both hard points to Boston pretty badly, and then that's why the model is really hitting Toronto for losing to them in hard point, because the model thinks Optic is really bad at hard point, but surprisingly they beat Toronto in it, right? So in Toronto, hardpoint had been a relative strength for them. So it's really confusing. It's like this top tier teams now. You can maybe make a case for 4 or so. Toronto is still up there, but I don't know. Where do you lean on this game? So I have my future bet, so I'm probably staying away from this. Are you touching anything on this, or are you just going to want to watch this game to see how it ends?
yeah, I do like Toronto minus a map and a half quite a bit. I mean, if you just compare this match to the match we just talked about, right? Toronto minus a map and a half plus 115, so better than even money odds. Atlanta FaZe minus a map and a half, even money. And to me, right, Toronto are clearly a better hardpoint team than FaZe, a much better control team, and their search is about the same. They're both very good search teams. So if they're playing the same opponent, like Toronto should be a heavier favorite. So yeah, this one I like Toronto more than Atlanta. I like the price better, and it's enough for me to want to take Toronto. And the one thing I will say is, right, if LAG come out in that FaZe game and show up, like we might think they like if they take it to a map 5 and look very competitive, winning hard points and keeping it close in search, like this Toronto price could get better, right? It could get more appetizing as someone who wants to take Ultra, just because, right, that LAG number is going to get a little inflated, might bring down Toronto's. If the opposite happens and FaZe come out and look dominant versus LAG, right, this price is going to go the other way. So a really hard line to try to like work around, but for me, I'm just going to take the guesswork out of it and take Toronto right now. Um, if you want to take FaZe 2 because you think they're close enough, that's okay. But just by principle, like I'd rather just have more on Toronto minus a map and a half than try to split it between the two and hope I get one or both of them right. So yeah, I like Toronto in this series. The Optic series was a bit of a shock, right? To see them, lose hard points like that, a 3-1 loss, right? You'd expect them to at least take Optic to a map 5, but good teams have bad days. That might have just been a bad day for that team. I still have a ton of confidence in Ultra. The roster's great. They're not going to go undefeated through the rest of the year, and maybe this Optic team is starting to figure it out. Because, yeah, they're 3-0 this stage. It hasn't been perfect for that Optic team, but they look much improved compared to last stage. So all in all, I think Toronto are better in every game mode than LAG. Hard points could be close, and maybe they drop a map, maybe they drop both. But I have confidence they'll win searches. They're so good at control. Like, to me, they're just clearly a better team. And I know the price is indicative of that, but I even think you could push it a little farther if you're the sports book. So give me Ultra. I try to take them like once a week, it seems like, but they're just such a good team that I think finding the right spots to take them makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think Toronto is the right call, but that minus 200, especially on my side because I'm dealing with the futures bet, that's too much for me. But I think if you're betting in again, there's some parlayable stuff here. I kind of think. I think there's some stuff you could
Oh,
definitely
yeah.
parlay this week. So, yeah. Moving on to the next game. Again, we were just talking about Optic. Now let's talk a bit more about Optic straight up. Las Vegas versus Optic. Vegas Legion plus 1.5, plus 105. Optic Texas -1 and -135. Plus 180 on the money line for Legion. -240 for Optic. Over 4.5 plus 180. So, in it, basically, Optic is a massive favorite here. And if you look at, well, a large favorite, if you look online in the fan predictions on CDL website, Optic's taking 87% of the predictions. That's a little high. That's just a little too high. But the problem is, though, is that like the model kind of agrees, not as high as the people online, but the model does like Optic barely to cover the -1.5. I've got Vegas. I've got Optic covering the -1.5, 52%, which is a little. It's a little low for -135. I think -135 is closer to like a 55, 60. So there's some value on the Vegas Legion plus 1.5, but not a lot. This could be one where if you want to wait maybe until after Legion gets destroyed by subliners, maybe then do it, bet it then. Um, but no, it's just like I don't know what, like, this Optic team is really confusing to me. And again, maybe Toronto had a bad day against Optic, completely possible, completely understandable. Optic has gotten the better of Toronto a lot last year. Last year they got it better than them a lot, and the year before they had their number. Last year Optic got the better of them. This year, I mean, this year they've only played the one time. But I think it's really it's such a weird sense with this team, right? I mean, we always talk about how good of a player Scump is, and he is probably the best. He'll probably go down as one of the best players ever in the history of the game. But is it that surprising if we get to a point where, you know what, maybe Scump's play style or something was potentially holding this team back? I mean, we're basically at a point where this is old Dallas Empire now, with exchange except you're basically replacing Crim6 with Dashi, which at this point is an upgrade because Crim6 has, I mean, Dallas Empire was 2020, and now you're basically 3 years later than that. So obviously, Krim's kind of aged out of the game and he's retired now. So you get a younger version of a younger AR in Krim, in Dashi over Krim. So is it possible that maybe this team is actually somewhat better without Optic, without Scump? And that also, there's also a case to be made here in terms of the viewership for the CDL, which is hilarious now. So now Scump is just live streaming every CDL match, and he's basically getting equal to or sometimes even more viewers than the official CDL stream, which is hilarious, which is a big problem for the CDL. Because if you're sitting here and you're the CDL and a former player, again, it doesn't matter who it could be, but if any former player is basically having your viewership, you've got a big problem. Because now all of a sudden, if Scump just says, I'm not going to stream your, I'm not going to, I don't like the way, I don't like the fact that there's no red dots on the map anymore, or that there's no this or that, I don't like this, I'm not streaming anymore. Now Scump has a huge leverage over the CDL, and they will eventually get to the point where they're going to use that. He will eventually use that leverage, and I think they know that. And they realize they're in trouble now. I think they realize they have a huge problem now because Scump could basically go to them and be like, "No, if you don't do this, I'm not going to stream matches anymore." They have a problem. So that's a fascinating angle to this. Again, we have again, and I was tracking it over the first weekend, and again, to be fair, over the first weekend, it did wane a bit. At first, Scump was crushing them, kind of went down a little bit as the weekend went on, and we'll have to watch this through the major and through this week and through the major as well to see if that trend holds. But if that trend holds for Optic, and if that trend holds for Scump, we've gained more viewers in the CDL. CDL needs to have a little bit of a reckoning there and needs to think, hey, why are they beating us in viewership, and how do we fix that in the future?
Yeah. I don't know. I have a different opinion on that. Right, Scump getting huge viewership I think was expected, and it's good for the league, right? The league made a statement that like, hey, Scump is going to be one of the co-streamers for this week and into the major, and it's exciting, right? You want to see him talk about the game, about his career, about his teammates while you're watching COD. He can give insight on the game while you're watching it. So, and the COD League just wants eyes on their product. I don't think it matters a ton to them if it's on their mainstream or a co-stream. Like, eyes are there. So I wouldn't be too worried if you're the COD League that like you have streamers that might be eclipsing your own viewership. I mean, last year we saw them team up with Tim the Tatman a little bit where he was co-streaming on YouTube. His numbers were huge, on par with what the COD League was doing. They didn't do that every weekend or every major or anything like that, but they just wanted to pair their brand with other big name personalities in esports. So, and especially having it be the first weekend Scump was doing it, like, yeah, even I tuned in just for a little bit to see, all right, what's he got to say? How does this whole co-streaming thing look? And it looks good. And I don't think if Scump threatened the league to say like, hey, listen, I've got all eyes on my stream, you guys like, I don't think he can use that as leverage because if he decides to stop co-streaming the matches, first off, I think that's dumb for him to do. Secondly, I don't think those streamers or those viewers are going, "Oh, Scump's not co-streaming it. I'm not even gonna bother watching," because it's viewers like you and me, Robert, who are gonna we'll watch whatever stream we want if it's the mainstream, if it's a co-stream, like whatever. Like the viewers who want to watch the CDL are there for the gameplay. The commentary is just bonus. So I don't know.
I I
Yeah,
will say
he
I will
could
say
use it as leverage, but I don't think we're there yet.
quick point on that though. I will say that like the people who are watching it for the games, I think they're watching the mainstream. And I think the people who are there because they kind of enjoy watching Call of Duty and they're not. I think I'd be surprised if the gamblers are not watching the mainstream. I think the gamblers are watching the mainstream. Like I was watching the mainstream. Were you watching the mainstream as well, or were you watching the Scump stream?
I was jumping around because that's one of the benefits. We're on Twitch now, mostly mainstream, but like, yeah, let me check out these other co-streamers just to see what they're about. It's just a good like brand expansion for everybody because if you don't know the COD League but you know these streamers, well, now you get introduced to the COD League, and if you like the COD League but you want to learn more about these streamers, you can go watch them either. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. I'm sure Scump's viewership will wane probably as the weeks go on. But yeah, for every Optic match, if he wants to fire up the stream and talk about his, former team and teammates and like yeah, it's going to get huge views and the COD League loves that. So it's just a good way to grow for everybody. But yeah, down the line, maybe he could use it as leverage in some way. But honestly, I think like he's not even trying to do that. Like he likes the views. He likes right getting Twitch dollars and all that stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that. But Vegas versus Texas here, it's mostly a stay away for me. Like I don't know. My numbers say that Vegas is a little bit of a value, but you take into account what these teams have done the last couple weeks, and yeah, I kind of think Optic will take care of business, probably 3-1. So yeah, Vegas is not a great upcoming weekend for them. Kind of expecting, you know, a couple matches not to go their way relatively quickly. So mostly a stay away for me. I still have enough questions with Texas that I'm not willing to jump on them right away. And the minus 135 on the -1.5 maps is a little rich for me. So just to stay away. But if you're an Optic fan, right, hope for a 3-1 or a 3-0. If that's the case, your team is like officially a contender, right? Like you're 3-0 now, you're 4-0 having beat Vegas. You know, you're not pushing it to a map 5 anymore. That's just steady improvement that you like to see. But yeah, if Vegas pull this out, it's probably again got to be a 3-2 just because there's such a good search and destroy team that's kind of the only way they can win. So, um, yeah, just an interesting match to sit back and watch and see how it goes. But yeah, I lean Optic, but not enough to really get me interested in anything.
Yeah, I think I think the -1.5 is a little much. But see, that's the other thing too, right? Like we now know that the optic money has come in. Like if you're if you're sitting there at -135, and that's with all of optic, like all the optic fanboys being in, like, yeah, okay, we're all on optic. Still, that's not very comforting, right? Like I feel like that number is pretty low for what. Like I mean, again, Vegas is probably one of the worst teams in the CDL, especially at hardpoint, right? So like I kind of feel like if you're sitting there and optic is only -135 to cover the -1.5, I worry.
Enticing, yeah, that's part of it too.
Like
But this
that's way
team,
too
which we've only
enticing.
seen a little, yeah, we've seen only a little bit of this team, and it's been good, right? Eventually, are we going to see a match where it disappoints? Yeah, eventually we'll get there. Maybe it's this Vegas match. Maybe it's the one after that. Maybe it's not until Major 2. But eventually, right, we'll see some sort of decline. I don't think this team is just going to keep ascending to the tippy top of the league. It very well could, but
Yeah,
at least for now, it's just to stay away from me.
yeah, agree. All right, actually second last game on Saturday: Boston versus Florida. Boston -1.5, -110. Florida +1.5, -120. Boston -170 on the money line. Florida +130. Over 4.5, +165. So this one is fascinating because I have this basically exactly tied. I have this Boston 50.1, Florida 49.9. Again, this is the questions are: what does changing Brack for Dave Patty mean? What does that do? Such a weird move. I kind of like the Florida +1.5, honestly. I really think that's the best value here. I got Florida +1.5 at about 51. I've got I mean, I've got everything basically the same. Like I've got it basically even, right? Like I've got a 3-2, but the problem is I think that it's very likely that someone will win in 4. Like I think that I've got the game evenly split, but it's like 50-50 whether or not a team, like, it's weird. Like it's 50-50 as to whether or not Boston will win in 4, or Florida will win. But if Florida covers the 1.5, then they win, right? Because if they get to the search, if they get to the search, then Florida will crush them in the search. But if they
Yeah.
don't get to the search, if Boston picks up either the search or the control, it's over, right? That's the problem. And this is again another thing with Dave Patty. Dave Patty comes in, fixes hard point. Suddenly, Florida is a massive favorite in this game, right? So I kind of think that this is, you might want to wait and see the result from the first game, but I kind of don't hate the idea of just betting on taking some Florida +1.5 right now and then hoping for the best. This is all that being said, though, for Boston, this is an awakening revenge game. This is vaguely a Vivid revenge game as well. I think Vivid has played Florida since, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So this is big wake revenge game. So maybe I want to take Boston here. I don't know. It's a hard call. I'm not the most sure as to either way. This is kind of in many ways a stay away. I just don't know if I want to bet the over 4.5, because I feel like if Boston wins, they win in 4, but if Florida wins, they win in 5, right? And that's not a, unfortunately, that's not a box you can check for like +120 or something.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I was going to mention that right away of, if you like the Florida plus a map and a half, yeah, just take a money line because their one strength, right, is search. Boston, very much not good at that. And yeah, huge discrepancies in hard point. Boston, very, very good. Florida, horrible, right? Florida's updated hard point record is 4-18 on the year. That's an 18% win rate. So yeah, just brutal. You got to think, right, the Dave Patty move is to help them in that game mode. at the same time, right, you don't want to have your search and destroy that's been so good fall off a little bit. So, right, it's a delicate balancing act. My numbers lean Boston a little bit, but not enough to get me excited about it. I do have Boston covering a map and a half 57% of the time, which does clear the minus 110 number. But yeah, I'm not in love with it, but I would lean to the Boston side. Less questions on that side, right? They haven't made any team changes yet. We know they're very good at hardpoint, and we know they're capable in control. I really do think that's where the series is decided. This, both teams in control are okay. Someone's got to win it, and I think whoever does probably gets the win in the series. My numbers lean Boston ever so slightly in that game mode too, so that's where I get the Boston breach pick. But yeah, just kind of one I'd like to skip over. Right, Florida play London the day before. That could determine their winners bracket fate already. Boston have been okay so far. They're 2-1 this stage, having some nice wins. Their only loss was against Optic, who has not lost yet. So overall, Boston's still a solid team. We'd like to see their search improve, and I think this is a good opponent to go up against just to see if they have improved in that mode at all in a week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's an important question, right? This Boston team has been okay, but not good. It's weird. This Boston team has like at some points like definitely met expectations, but not. I mean, they beat Vegas, that's good, but week 1 I think they went 1-1. Yeah, no, sorry, they lost. They went. So basically, um they're 2-1, so that's not bad. They need to probably win a couple games, maybe two or 1 or 2 games to get to the winners bracket. They've got Florida here, winnable. It's just I don't know what to make of this Boston team, right? Like, are they a contender? Are they not a contender? Some weeks they look like a contender. Some weeks they don't look like a contender. I don't know. We didn't see a lot out of them last week, and they did lose to an Optic team, which looked bad. But at the same point in time, if Optic's on the rebound, maybe this Boston team could be legit, right? So maybe that -1.5, maybe not that bad. Let's see how that Florida versus London match goes, and then we'll go from there. Maybe we can get plus money on Boston too. Who knows, right? Next
True.
up, last match on Saturday. Seattle versus Subliners. Seattle +1.5 -120. Subliners -1.5 -110. Surge on the money line +180. Subliners on the money line -240. I have no idea why this one is this way at all. I've got no idea at all. I've got a Subliners 3-1. I've got Subliners covering a -1.5 68% of the time. Subliners -1.5 all the way. Um, Seattle might be decent at hardpoint, so maybe lay off a hardpoint spread, but like you can start picking away at like search and control spreads all day. Like
Yeah.
I don't understand why this number is this way at all. Do you understand why this number is this way?
Um. Eh. I mean, it is a rematch of the Major One final, and that did go Subliner's way by a mile. And since then, it's only been good things for Subliners and only bad things for Surge. So, but right at my core, I still want to believe in Seattle Surge. But man, they don't show anything in Surge, and their control has tailed off quite a bit. Um, their hard point is solid. I have hard point in this series about 50-50 each side. But man, it's an uphill climb for Surge when you're talking about search and destroys. They had one good map last week against Optic. It was their map 2. They lost 6-4, but they showed some things of like, hey, this is a team that eventually is going to win a search and destroy, and they just don't. I mean, we heard Shotzi talk about it on stream that like when they were playing Surge and Search and Destroy, just very predictable. Like they could see what they were running just about every round they played, and when your setups are that easy to break and like it's just so predictable, like you're way behind the 8 ball when it comes to Search and Destroy. Control, you'd think they'd be better at, but they just have struggled quite a bit. Now you're running into one of the best control teams in the game in New York. Just dominant offense, defense doesn't matter. So Yeah, this one's tough. On the spreads, I don't really see a value either way. The I have New York minus a map and a half about 50% of the time. So the fact that it's minus 120 and minus 110 on either of those sides, that is a total stay away for me. Um, New York money line, it's rich, but if you want to throw that in a parlay, that's okay. Um, I just think the New York minus a map and a half could get spoiled by two Seattle Surge hardpoint wins because that's the only game mode they're good at. And if one of these days they show up in a search and destroy, or maybe can scrape by in that control, that minus 1.5 is already dead. I think if it is a long series, if it goes to that map 5, I have a lot of faith in New York to get it done. Um, and if Surge just look the same old Surge in search and control, then I'm okay. Like, New York should get this done pretty easily. It's a lot of what ifs, though. The one thing I know for sure is New York is a far superior team. The money line is not too rich for my taste, so I would try to incorporate that in some way. Maybe like a search and destroy specific spread for New York if you're just really, in the dumps with Surge. But yeah, this is it's a huge match for Surge, right? We got to see something from them at some point. And this is their first match of the weekend. It's a revenge game for them for Major 1. And honestly, even if they don't win the series, if Surge can just show that they can compete with New York and that they belonged in Major 1, I'll be a lot happier about their, future outlook. But I don't know. I just worry this thing is over quick. And even if not, like, I just worry their search and destroy is still not fixed.
Yeah, I think the Seattle Surge actually has this team has a lot of problems, and I think that just because you've now said, "Oh, okay, here is basically now you're just like, all right, well, we're not going to sell off the team. We're going to keep the team together." But like the team had problems, and okay, yes, they had a really great Major 1, came second place. Good, great, good for them. But they struggled in the qualifiers. They had a really good major. Again, they had a relatively easy group, I think. I think they were able to get through groups relatively easily. I think because I think they beat a challengers team. I think. Oh no, they beat a challengers team. Beat FaZe into the basically. Then you're through. I think they beat someone else and they beat FaZe again. Then they're in the finals and then they lose to Subliners. So they had a relatively easy path, but they're just not able to compete with the rest of the league. And I mean, maybe they can fix it again. They're going to go through it. But again, like when you watch this, and every time I watch this team play, I look. This is the first thing I look for, right? Who is look at the KDs, right? And every time you see it, it's accuracy and Mac, basically the same KD, basically even, and it's Sib and Pred. They're both positive and they're both carrying the team. And this is the problem, right? This is why they're able to succeed, right? If you shut down Pred and Sib, this team is you crush this team because accuracy and Mac can't pick up the slack. All the good teams, like when you look at Toronto or Subliners or FaZe even, like FaZe, if Selim's having a bad game, that's okay. Sib and Abizi can come up and take the slack, right? If Standy is having a bad game, well then Scrap can step up. Scrappy can step up. If Scrappy's having a bad game, Standy and Insight can step up. If Hydra's having a bad game, then you have Priesta or Kismet could step up and they could do some stuff. But in the Subliners team, if Sib or Pred if Pred has a bad game, and then if Sib isn't like amazing in that game, then you're done. You're just done. There's no coming back. And that's the point. That's the way the roster construction works in this league. You have to have 4 good players. Or in the case of Surge, they're somehow able to make this work. And one of the reasons why they're so inconsistent is they're able to make it work with 2 amazing players and 2 like mediocre players is how they're able to make it work. And it just happens that if mediocre players have a half decent game, great, we win and we blow them out. But if they don't, then we're done. Right. And I think that's the problem. And I think it's something this team hasn't fixed yet and they haven't addressed. And to be honest, I don't know how they're going to address it, but it's something that they need to fix going forward, I'd say.
Yeah, I completely agree. You just look at search and destroy KDs alone. Pred is the highest. He's at a .98. And when you consider like the lack of support on the rest of the team and the fact that he's the one getting first bloods most of the time, if Sib's not sniping them, like 0.98 is impressive for Pred. Sib has a 0.86. That's not great, but again, a lack of support around him because Mac and Accuracy, who often aren't tasked with getting those first bloods, they're just in setup positions. Mac a 0.71, Accuracy a 0.70. And yeah, it's gotten to a point now where Accuracy, I think most people would agree that Accuracy, just by a pure gun skill, is maybe the worst player in the league. Like, it is just some of the shots he takes. If you're on his POV, like, it's probably not going well. And it's gotten to a point now where it's like, I get the whole leadership thing. I get that he, helps with strategies, but when your strategies in Search and Destroy are so predictable and you're relying on Pred to get a three-piece and a bomb defuse to win a round, it's like something's got to change. And those two players just stick out so clearly. Now, if you're Seattle, do you take both of them out of the lineup at the same time and put in two new guys? Maybe I would maybe consider just bench Mac first for a replacement, see if that does anything. If not, maybe pull the plug on Accuracy too afterwards. But yeah, something's got to change because yeah, Pred and Sib cannot play 2v4, and a lot of times they are tasked with that, especially in the Search and Destroy game, where they already have the work cut out for them trying to get those first bloods to begin with. So yeah, Surge, I'm hoping they can figure this out eventually, but yeah, I it's tough. It'll take a lot for me to kind of buy back into them, and specifically, you just got to show me something in Search and Destroy because it's just been bad so far.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. Moving on to Sunday now. So these are games that are going to be competing with the NFL games on Sunday, the conference championship games. Minnesota versus Seattle again. Seattle's playing two straight games again, just like LEG on Friday, Saturday. Minnesota plus 1.5 minus 240, which is weird because they're the favorites. They're minus 135 on the money line. Seattle minus 1.5 plus 180. They're plus 105 on the money line. Weird kind of split there. This Minnesota team, again, such a weird weekend from them last weekend. I actually Minnesota favored here, which is agreement with the betting lines, but pretty substantially. I've got them about a 74% favorite here. My model just hates Surge. Maybe my model is just a hater. It's my model is very clearly not from Seattle. Um, but yeah, I don't hate this at all. I don't hate Minnesota here. I don't even hate Minnesota minus 1.5. They actually showed they can actually win a they showed they can actually win a hard point by beating FaZe in a hard point, and even getting close to beating FaZe in a hard point is still showing you can win in a hard point. And LAG is no such hard point, and they still beat them too. So yeah, give me Minnesota here. I'm on the. I think Rocker can get a win here. What do you think?
Yeah, so despite all the negatives I've talked about with Surge, I actually do have them as a slight favorite over Minnesota, which is kind of shocking. Like I did not expect to see that when I punched in these two teams. Um, so that being said, the Surge minus a map and a half at plus 180 is somewhat enticing. Surge are good hardpoint. They're just a good hardpoint team. Minnesota, they got the 4-point win last week, and then they dropped two to LAG. And it's like, yeah, okay, they beat FaZe, but not in an impressive fashion. When you win by four, it's like, yes, it's against a good team. You like to see a hard point win, but you add that with the rest of the results, and it's not good. So I think a Seattle 3-1 actually is pretty likely. This game really just comes down to control. And yeah, and they're both solid at it. I mean, I don't think Surge can compete with New York in their match prior, but this game much more doable. And I think the match is really decided there in that map three. So we'll see how the map vetoes play out for that. But Surge a heavy favorite in hardpoint, Minnesota a heavy favorite in the search. Control pretty close. Um, but yeah, I'm okay if you want to favor Rocker just because we've seen Surge be bad for what 4 straight matches now. Um, so yeah, this one may be a stay away for me, but if Surge looks so flat against New York on Saturday, their number could get inflated to a point where I am a little interested in that. But um, yeah, even as a Minnesota fan, I'm saying that and it hurts. But I don't know, man. These teams are, yeah, they're close to each other. The line seems to indicate that. So stay away from me now, but maybe buy into it if Seattle, fall flat against New York. If their search still looks troublesome, maybe their number gets inflated enough where it's like a 3-1 over Minnesota still could happen. Um, just, hoping that search gets a little better because it has to get a little better. But to me, this match is just a battle of two frauds right now. Like, I don't know what to think of Minnesota, and Seattle is trending so far down. Somebody's got to win this though, so I'll root Minnesota. But yeah, it's just a messy match. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it is. It is a must. It is a. This is a messy match. I'm on Minnesota though. I still don't trust this Surge team, and I will say that if you go on those pickums, 67% of fan predictions are on Surge. 67.2%. That is way too much money on an underdog.
Wow, that
That is
surprised me
that's
for how
too.
bad they've looked.
That,
67%.
yeah, and I will say that the subliners are 73% against them, which is about right. That may be a little too low actually. Surge gained 26% of the picks against subliners. That's about right. It's a little high. I'd say that should be a little lower, but that's fair. But you should not be picking Seattle over Minnesota. I think Minnesota is a better fundamental team. So that's my take on it. I think that I'll take that. But actually, I'm just looking at Minnesota is 4-1 against Seattle in the last 5, which is weird. And a lot of those are in 20. A lot of them are last year, but 2 of them are actually this year, I think. No, no. Oh wait, they only played twice last year. Wow, what a weird. They played 3 times in 2021, and then also that was the bad Seattle team, so that's not really applicable then. But that's yeah. I'm gonna take the. I'm taking Minnesota here. I think Minnesota is just a better team. Moving on to the second last game of the weekend here. Thieves versus Breach. Thieves plus one and again, they're doing the same weird thing again. Thieves plus 1.5 minus 240. Breach minus 1.5 plus 180. Thieves minus 135 on the money line. Breach plus 105. My model loves Breach here. I got Breach 60% chance to beat Thieves, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't know what this issue with that is, with Thieves is. Like, this Thieves team is, again, maybe we see sometimes in the NFL and even like basically a year ago with FaZe after they won. There's a bit of a hangover after you win champs, I guess. I guess that kind of makes some sense. Um, but no, I don't understand why this team is looking so bad right now. It just doesn't look good. It does not look good. And I mean, they crushed London, which again, congrats, good job there. But like, London is not a particularly good team. London probably should have put up more of a fight, but they unfortunately did not. But just because you crush London doesn't mean you're back. This is not like a yeah, you're back. Thieves are back, guys. They beat London. Like, no, give me Boston here. It's about even, and again, it speaks to how unsure the market is about stuff this weekend. But yeah, give me the Breach here. I think like that. I think it's you can also get a minus 1.5 at. I think you can get a Boston minus 1.5 plus 180. So that's not horrible. You wish that was closer to 200. I've got the Boston minus 1.5 at about 30%. So it's not great value there. Um, but I think maybe you can play around with. There's probably going to be some hard point spreads or something you can bet in this game. So, but yeah, I'm on Boston here. You won't catch me dead with a Thieves ticket here. How about you? And I'm just
Yeah,
before I pass it off to you, I'll just mention that the public betting splits, 69%, 69.9% on Thieves for fan predictions. So have it that what you
wow.
will.
Yeah, a little high. I have this as pretty much a straight up toss up. I do have Thieves favored slightly, 54% to 46% for Boston. Yeah, Thieves last week, they split their series. They obviously didn't have Kenny for either of those. They were playing with Capsule, who looked pretty good, but considering a substitute player, like a 1-1, match record for last week, I think is expected, right? You're at least not out of contention for a winner's bracket spot. If you're Thieves, you need this win, and then you need some help to crawl in with a 2-3 record. But yeah, Boston have looked better than them this stage. Uh, and even with Kenny back, like maybe there's a week of rust built up with him back in the lineup. So yeah, I think it's a toss up, or yeah, maybe lean Boston just if you're looking at recent match records. So yeah, to me, a stay away. I don't really have the conviction you do with Boston. I think the rest of this Thieves team is very good, and I think can go toe to toe with Boston. Hence, I mean, why they're favored. But yeah, the fan prediction on that a little high for my taste. But we'll see if this moves at all over the week. Right, Boston play Florida. We do expect them to kind of take care of business there. And if that's the case, we could see a Boston that's favored by the time this game goes. So yeah, if you're like Robert and you like Boston, I just go ahead and take them now, because I really can't see this number dropping at all, considering Thieves, don't have a match and have a Kenny back in the lineup after a week of not playing, um, and considering Boston have a relatively easy opponent the day before that they should handle with relative ease. So yeah, I could go either way. I could talk about this and how much I'm on the fence with it for hours, but I'll just continue sitting on my fence and watch this game from afar. But I'm totally okay with your Boston pick.
I think that's fair. I think that's more than a fair assessment of that. Last game of the weekend, and possibly one of the best games of the weekend. Optic versus Phase. Optic plus 1.5 minus 200. Phase minus 1.5 plus 150. Optic in the money line plus 105. Phase minus 135. I've got Phase about 54.3 to Optic 45.7. So pretty close here. I guess there'd be very, very slight advantage on Optic, but not a lot. I've got about a 40% chance this is going to a game 5. So again, maybe warm up that over 4.5 at plus 165. That's not a bad bet there. I kind of don't think either of these teams are going to finish each other off in 3 or 4. I think maybe this goes to 5. But there's a very real chance. Actually, I'm fairly sure this will be. Well, it depends on what happens with LAG Atlanta. But like, there's a very real chance this could be for the number 1 seed. If FaZe beats LAG and then Optic beats Las Vegas, this is for the 1 seed, I believe. But if LAG were to beat Atlanta, I think if FaZe were to beat Optic, then Toronto would get the 1 seed again. I think. But then if Optic were to win it, I don't know. Be very confusing. You know what? Honestly, I'm not even going to focus on tiebreakers. This is going to be a good match. And this is going to really show us exactly how far Optic has come. Was that match against Toronto a fluke? Are they one of the top teams? Because again, they beat up a Seattle team that has a lot of question marks, a Boston team that also has a lot of question marks. Yes, they did beat a Toronto team that's good, but it was a really weird match, and I still don't know what happened. I'm going to have to go back and review it. And they're going to play Las Vegas again, definitely not a top tier team. This is the best team since Toronto they're going to play, and this is going to set the tone for the major. Is Optic truly back? Is this a new Optic that we're seeing that's actually really strong or not? And for FaZe, again, this FaZe is nowhere near been as dominant as it has in the past. I don't know who to pick here. This is one where I might stay away from it. I might take an over 4.5 and just sit back and watch. How about you? Do you see any sort of advantage in this game, or are you kind of with me on that? Just like, let's just sit back and watch this game.
Yeah, right now with these numbers, I'm not super inclined to pick either side. I do lean FaZe, but they are the slight favorite at minus 135. I think the best way to go about this would be if we think that FaZe LAG on Friday could be closer than some people think, and if you think like me that Optic should take care of business versus Legion, we could get to Sunday night and Optic are now a favorite. And if that's the case, I'll buy back on Atlanta there. I just don't know how, like, I'm so iffy on those first 2 matches for both these teams that I don't know. Like, FaZe could balloon up to a bigger favorite if the opposite happens, or if FaZe look dominant versus LAG at least. So, right now, not super interested, but I might be. if Optic continue the surge, beating Legion, and FaZe maybe struggle again versus this LAG team, yeah, that wouldn't shock me to see Optic as favorites. I mean, they're already pretty close to that considering they're at plus 105. So I think it's a wait and see approach for me. If those games go that way, there might be a really good buyback opportunity on FaZe as slight underdogs. But if they're anything close to like, yeah, this minus 135 or higher, it's a stay away for me. And if Optic come out and struggle versus Vegas, like I don't think their number's going to improve enough where they're going to balloon up to like a plus 150. Like I just can't envision that happening. Um, so yeah, right now just to wait and see, but um, it's going to be a heck of a match. I'll tell you that right now. And yeah, hugely consequential when you talk about overall seeding for the major. This could be Optics' only loss. This could be to go perfect. And yeah, Atlanta having stumbled against Rocker, they need all the wins they can get. So huge, huge match. I believe it'll be the first FaZe versus Optic match of the year. And yeah, should be a doozy.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this match. I don't know what's going to happen, but again, this is it for us now. We will this is the last match before the major. We're going to have this match on Sunday, and then we will be back on Thursday for the beginning of the major, and then we'll have obviously futures and all this stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for this. I mean, there's a lot of good matches this weekend. You're gonna have that majors the winners bracket is gonna be insane. Like you're gonna have I think functionally Toronto has clinched the winners bracket already. Subliners have I think probably clinched winners bracket already. LAG could be in the mix for it. FaZe is in the mix for it. Definitely Boston as well. Optic as well. I think could pretty much also functionally clinch. So like it's gonna be a stacked winners bracket. Um, and yeah, I'm really excited to see this major. This major is going to be probably one of the better majors we've seen. Like I think, and I'm actually just really excited for the pricing on who's going to win it. I don't even know like who do you even think is going to be? I mean, obviously it's going to depend a lot on this weekend, but like who do you think is even going to be the favorite to win the major? Like, I don't even know.
Honestly, depending if Optic go perfect, right? If they beat Vegas, if they take out FaZe,
Like what plus two
you
fifty
can make
optic?
a yeah, you could make a case that they should be the favorite. So, I mean, I don't know. It could go any of which way, but like, there's probably right. If Optic go perfect, I think you keep FaZe in that top tier, even if they lose to Optic. And I think Toronto and New York should take care of business here, where they end up with probably 3 or 4 wins to qualify for winners bracket. I think those could be our big four: Tech, Optic, Toronto, New York, and Atlanta. Now we'll see. One or two of those teams might falter off a little bit, but to me, those are at least Toronto, New York, and Atlanta. I'm still pretty sold on that they are at the top. Optic are making a very strong case that they belong there, and yeah, this weekend will prove that or not. But going into Major Two, I have to say those four are going to be the favorites. After that, I'm not in love with a lot of teams. Like I think you'd maybe say Boston would be the next best, and then after that, it's just kind of a crapshoot of whoever you like. And even some teams that have had bad qualifiers, like Seattle, LA Thieves, right? They can make noise at a major, even if they start in a losers bracket. So, yeah, a lot of excitement next weekend, and I am also pumped for those futures odds because honestly, I'm not in love with a lot of the matches this weekend. But if you show me a futures market, I can find some value in that next week for sure.
Yeah,
So
for sure. I mean, the ones I'm going to look at for prices are Toronto, LAG, FaZe is you can like there's a price where I think you have to bet FaZe. I don't know what that number is. That number's probably around 6 to 1 or so. But like that is a number that like there's a number when it's at a certain point where it's like you have to bet you can't not bet FaZe at that point. Right?
yeah,
And like I think that's probably around 6 to 1, maybe 6, 7, 8 to 1. I think that's probably around that price. Toronto, if you like again, but here's the thing though, and like we might like in some ways we actually should be Optic fans this weekend because if Optic does go on a run, goes 5-0. I mean, if they go 5-0 strong and they just crush FaZe, I mean, they could be like maybe plus 150 to win the major. Because the thing of it is, they have to realize that they're going to take a lot of optic money, and that's going to push optic's price up, and then that means that everybody else's prices are going to be inflated. So that means you could be looking at phase at a six. Because the thing is, it's not just like, okay, it's optic, and then there's only one other team that could beat optic. It's going to be like optic or like phase Toronto subliners, and all of them are going to have to be grouped around 6 or so to 1, right? So you're going to get
Yeah.
great value on if you like a particular not optic, you're going to get great value on not optic at 6 to
Yeah.
1, and like LEG will probably be like 12 to 1 or something. They could be in the winners bracket. Boston could be a target as well. Toronto, again, if Toronto's anywhere near 10 to 1, I'm taking that 100%, not a question. Same as subliners too, right? So yeah, lots of really cool, and again, it's also going to depend on where the path goes, like the path for the major and who's playing who. And yeah, going to be a fascinating week. So keep an eye out for us. We will be recording next week. Maybe we're going early next week. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But we'll be back next week. Obviously, we're going to have our futures, and all those other markets, and we'll be back next week. See you guys. Have a good weekend.